Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar today on the top legal tips for successfully engaging an influencer for your brand and social media promotions. I'm April Thomas. I'm the co-founder of Cherrypicka Legal Docs, which is an online legal template provider, providing small businesses and entrepreneurs with access to easy to download legal templates. I'm also a lawyer with 15 years experience in the commercial law space. Today we're going to talk about some of the common tips and traps around engaging influencers. And this is a really hot topic for small businesses. I thought I'd start with a few quotes which I found on an online chat group sort of around people's experiences with influencers. So our first friend here says, advice needed, RE, influencer ghosting after paying invoice and gifting product. The second lady here says, last week we did our first paid influencer promotion. It was disappointing. Always liked the account. And I thought I'd ask here to clarify a couple of things to see if this is the norm or not. It's been 2 months and she hasn't opened any of my messages and hasn't posted a thing. I desperately need advice because I've once again run into a dead-end influencer. So I think the majority of influencers are trying to do the right thing, but you can certainly fall into some traps. So today we're going to learn how to protect yourself in these situations. I thought I'd start with an example of something that went wrong with a real life influencer. So this here is Anna Roberts, and she's a gym and fitness ambassador. She entered into an arrangement with a Melbourne restaurant, and the restaurant said they would pay Anna $500 or $300, sorry, for every post that she did in the restaurant. Anna did post the pictures that she took, and then she claimed the money from the restaurant. However, when the restaurant went and had a look at Anna's page, she had deleted the posts, and the restaurant owner said that they didn't have to pay Anna because she hadn't lived up to her end of the deal. Now, this type of situation could have easily been overcome had the restaurant owner had a contract in place which specified that once Anna had posted the content onto her page, that Anna had to keep that up. But the contract was non-existent, and so it did leave a lot of this grey area. Now, in the end, I think the court ordered that the restaurant had to pay Anna a percentage, but not all of the money, because ultimately, you get that first impact when the posts go up, and the fact that she subsequently deleted it later, the benefit had already been received from the restaurant. There are the agenda for today. So we'll talk through the type of influencer arrangements between structured collabs and gifting. We'll talk through that influencer marketing is advertising, and so what you have to be careful of in terms of what laws apply to advertising. Talk through who regulates social media posting and what to do if you get a complaint from one of these regulatory authorities. We'll talk through some special rules for special industries such as cosmetics or alcohol, because there are some special sort of frameworks that apply to this type of collaboration. We can talk through what happens if you get ghosted and other sad endings. What action could you take against the influencer? And then finally, how can you source legal contracts and advice if you need it in relation to these issues? So firstly, let's talk through the types of influencer engagements. So the first one is what I would call a structured collaboration. So that's when you're entering into a fairly formal and potentially even long-term brand arrangement with an ambassador. This could include you want them to do some social posting on Instagram. You might like them to do some posting through TikTok. They might even have to make an appearance somewhere for you, and in exchange you're doing you're paying them, or you're providing them with contra, or sometimes, and this is often really common, is a combination of money and contra. And contra obviously means giving them some of your product. These kind of collaborations, usually are making contact with the influencer, and you're agreeing these terms either directly with them or through their agent. And then the second type of engagement is more informal, and that's where you're sending them a gift. and there's usually less conditions around that second type of unstructured collaboration. So what's important in the land of structured collaborations? What types of things do you need to be including in your collaboration agreements? The first point here is very simple, is please have a written agreement in place. I think if you have that written agreement in place, you do have to do a little bit more work up front, but you're really weeding out the professional, influencers who are going to take this seriously versus someone who, is going to take you for a ride. So I think having that written contract in place is really important. Payment terms. So what I always recommend to my clients is that you consider payment by milestones. So you might pay a proportion on signing of the contract. You pay a proportion upon, first post, second post, third post, and then the rest once you're satisfied that the job's being done correctly. And by structuring it that way, if something goes wrong, you haven't lost all your money up front. Third, what will the influencer create? Be specific. So obviously you do want that natural tone to your post. So you don't want to dictate exactly what the influencer has to say, but include some key messages. What are you trying to get the public to understand about your product? Is it a new product? Has it got a new ingredient in it? Like what is it that you're trying to drive home? Are there any specific hashtags you want them to use, and what is the timing around, when do you want these posts to go out? The fourth one relates to exclusivity. So this would be more in sort of longer term collaboration agreements. And this can be really useful. So if you're engaging an influencer and you're you make jeans, for example, through the course of the term of their relationship with you, which say might be 3 months, you don't want them to work with a competitor and who also sells jeans, and then you're just confusing your audience. So consider requiring them to act exclusively for you for a set period in your category. This fifth point here is pre-approval of content. So this I really recommend for clients in more high-risk industries. So if you've got an influencer who's engaged to promote alcohol or, a cosmetic, for example, and there are specific rules around that, sometimes it's a good idea to vet that content. Also, if you have an influencer who could be a bit of a loose cannon, which sometimes is great for the brand, but you also might want to ask them to send through the content for your pre-approval as well before it goes out on the posts. This final one is so critical, and this is the right to request removal of content or amendment of content. So later in this presentation, I'll talk through this whole concept of, your control over the influencer. And I think if you're seeing that the influencer is posting misleading content, for example, or content that goes against particular rules, or they haven't disclosed their commercial relationship with you, then you need to have that ability to get them to take it down. This sort of segues in, which is that the disclosure of the commercial relationship is integral, and we have seen time and time again influencers being reprimanded for this, and that then has the potential repercussions for your brand as well. So please ensure that they're using sponsored, ad paid, or using the partnership tools available through the platforms such as the Instagram paid partnership post. This is a legal requirement, so it's really important that your contract has this clause in there. Intellectual property ownership. So this is a really interesting one. So who owns the content that the influencer creates? You want to be clear on what you're allowed to do with it. So if the influencer creates fantastic, shots at the beach wearing your swimwear, and then you want to be able to use those photos, how can you use it? Are you allowed to put it on your website? Are you allowed to reshare it to your own pages? What if they come up with a slogan in the course of doing their shoot, which goes viral? Are you allowed to use that? Do you own that slogan for your future promotional activities? So being clear on who owns the IP and in what way is also something that would be covered by a contract and is very important. How do you terminate the agreement? So if the influencer has got caught up in a scandal, for example, you want to have a clear way in the contract to be able to terminate that and potentially to get them to take down any posts that link you and the influencer. Or say, you're halfway through and your marketing budget changes, you need to be able to terminate the contract. So that's something for consideration. And then finally is this, are there any special considerations or rules that apply? So this comes into play when you've got, cosmetic surgeons or medical devices or, other therapeutic goods or alcohol or financial services where you've got a higher risk category. Sometimes you need to incorporate some very specific instructions for your influencers around what they can and can't do. And all of these things I've just talked about can be dealt with if you've got a really good legal contract. Most of these or all of these things would be covered off. The next category is the gifting. So this is where you don't have as much control. So you're literally just sending something to the influencer in the hope that they like it and that they'll post about it. What I would say in relation to this and what I recommend to my clients is do consider putting in a gift insert. I'm sure you all do this already, saying, here it is, thank you for working with us. But this could be a little bit more formal and just reminding them that if they do choose to post about the product, to please use the hashtag gifted. And also, depending what the product is as well, you could consider including some particular messages or reminders about what they should and shouldn't say on their post as well. So another, perfect example is alcohol. You can't depict, drinking an alcoholic beverage in the swimming pool because that would go against the ABAC code. So even if you are gifting, you still might need to include some, some guidance. The next point to make is that influencer marketing is still advertising and it is subject to the same laws as other forms of advertising. So what are those other forms of advertising, you might ask? These are largely known as consumer laws and they do apply to social media. The whole crux of the consumer law really comes down to the fact that all statements made must be truthful and not misleading. So if an influencer that you have engaged is posting things about your products that are grossly exaggerated or, just incorrect, and you've got that agreement with them, it is your responsibility to contact them and to get them to amend that content. Further, if you're wanting to reshare and repost that content, you want to make sure that everything is completely compliant. So I said here, claims must be truthful and not misleading. So that's prices for products and services must be accurate. The images and descriptions of products and services must be clear. This is really important, this third one. So claims about the value, benefits, qualities, or performance of their products and services must not mislead. So an example of that could be, you've got a cleaning product that you've developed and you know that, it reduces germs by a certain percentage. If the influencer you engage jumps online and says, this 100% success rate of clearing all germs, and that's not correct, you have an obligation to go and correct that statement and ask the influencer to change it as well. And information about shipping options and delivery times must be truthful. So this is just general common sense stuff, and I think it's unsurprising that it applies to social media, but I think it is just worth reminding yourself of this to ensure that all statements, not only you are making, but influencers in your control are making, are truthful. This goes to the previous point, is that businesses are responsible for all posts on your pages and within your control. So what this means is, on your own social pages, this is digressing slightly from influencers, but if there's posts or reviews that are going up on your own pages about your products which are misleading or false, then it's your responsibility to jump on and delete those. And secondly, review and monitor influencers and request that they remove or amend posts that might be false or misleading as well. And the response that you must make to that misleading comment must be enough to override the false impression made by the original post. So usually it's safer to remove a comment or a post. There are special rules for certain industries. So if you're selling or supplying alcohol, you're governed by ABAC and the particular rules there. And there's quite a lot. This is, largely that you're not depicting pictures of people under a certain age group who are drinking, that you're not depicting alcohol as giving you a sense of false confidence and fun, that you're not depicting the drinking of alcohol around water. So there's a lot to consider there. Cosmetics, I'm sure you're aware that there's been some regulatory change, particularly in this field around, what you can and can't say. Cosmetics, you have to be so careful that you're not making claims that imply that the goods have a therapeutic effect. So that essentially means, curing or fixing or going towards a particular ailment of the body. You can't overstretch because those type of goods need to have registration with the Therapeutic Goods Administration. If you are selling cosmetics, you have to stick to, claims about the appearance of the skin. So that's something that if you're in that industry, it's probably a good idea to get, more specific legal advice around. I can't imagine too many people watching this webinar selling medical devices, but again, if you are, that's regulated by the TGA, and there is a bunch of guidance around influencer marketing of medical devices. Cosmetic and plastic surgeons have just come under a huge review recently by APRA around what they can and can't say in terms of their social posting with influencers, and the before and after photos. They have to be very factual and stick to, proven claims, not talking about, being perfect or looking amazing, just really sticking to the clear medical-based and evidence-based guidelines around plastic surgeries. And again, I can't imagine too many people today would be in that financial services industry, but the extent you are, you have to, follow the financial services guidelines around, your posting too. Make sure if you are in any of these industries, please get specific legal advice and make sure that your agreements reflect any special requirements imposed by these bodies. So who regulates social media posting? What happens if an influencer puts a post up and it doesn't have the gifted tag, for example, or there's a misleading statement? So the bodies that administer or regulate include the AANA, so that's the Australian Association of National Advertisers. If a consumer or a competitor has a complaint, they can lodge a submission to this body, and then the complaints are managed by ad standards, and they are the ones that you would receive a letter from and you'd be answerable to. The ACCC, being the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, might get involved to the extent that the claims are of a particular standard that you have misled and deceived a large group of consumers. So the telcos a few years ago were pulled up by the ACCC in relation to some social media posts that said that their data plans were unlimited, when in fact they were not unlimited. This was all done through social media, and the ACCC got involved because it was that sort of next level misleading and deceptive conduct. And then finally, the industry dependent bodies. So as I said before, with alcohol, ABAC would get involved, the TGA for medical devices. So there's a bunch of different, levels of bodies that could contact you in the event that a post was, allegedly infringing a law or code. So what do you do if you get a complaint? So I thought I'd just talk through what the process looks like, because it can be quite scary and quite daunting if you have never received a complaint before about your social posting. So typically you would get a letter from the relevant bodies. So let's say, for example, an influencer that you'd engaged had not disclosed that their post was gifted. You might get and a competitor makes a complaint. You might get a letter from Ad Standards. They would then request that you reply to that, and they'd give you an opportunity to say why you are or are not, liable in that particular situation. And probably recommend at that point that you do get some legal advice to respond most appropriately. I think it's important to know that if you don't respond at that point, a negative determination might be made against your brand. So usually the recourse would be, so it all goes to the Ad Standards, and then they make a decision, then they publish the decision publicly. So you can jump onto Ad Standards and you can actually go through and see, what brands have been pulled up in relation to their social posting. Usually the recourse is that the post is deleted. And interestingly, with my clients, 9 times out of 10, unless I think they have a really strong case, I would just recommend that they delete it straight away anyway. But more serious action could be taken if the post was considered to be quite misleading. And as I've said there, other regulatory bodies might become involved. But, a lot of the times it's, simply a matter of a slap across the wrist. Please remove the post and don't do it again. But, you still get that reputational damage, and the decision goes up onto the Ad Standards page, irrespective of whether it's a good outcome or not for you. So a question that I often get asked is, what happens if I get ghosted by an influencer? Or what happens if they don't live up to their end of the bargain? So a lot of this can be dealt with by having a really good contract in place. If you do have a good contract in place, I recommend, as I said, that you structure your payments to minimize the risk. So please don't pay them up front. Pay them, upon the achievement of milestones. Write a letter to the influencer if they haven't pulled up their end of the bargain. That's usually what I'd recommend first, setting out, what they've promised and, why they haven't performed. You could get a lawyer to help you do that. And if you've got a contract, you could potentially have a breach of contract claim as well if the influencer has not lived up to their part of the bargain. You could also consider making a claim to fair trading because the influencer is providing a service, and assuming that you're a small business, you could have a claim under the Australian consumer laws that the influencer has not lived up to their side of the bargain as well. So there are a few different things that you can do. I think, having that structured payment is great. Writing a letter in the first instance to the influencer, setting out what the failings have been, potentially getting a lawyer, with the knowledge that if you've got a contract in place, you could have a breach of contract claim and get an award of damages against the influencer if they haven't done what they said they would do. Why do I need contracts? So this is a question that I get asked a lot. I think in this industry, particularly in retail, everyone's lovely and you're doing a lot of handshake or over the email type arrangements. And 9 times out of 10, they work really well until they don't. And unfortunately, that's, usually when the lawyers get involved. But it helps set out the expectations of the parties in front. And as I said at the beginning, it will weed out a lot of influencers that aren't prepared to be professional because they're not going to want to invest the time up front with the collaboration. It makes you look professional as a brand. It's going to help prevent disputes down the track. So if the influencer hasn't done what they said they would do, you've got a clause in the contract that sets that out clearly. And it helps protect your reputation. As I said before, if you do get brought before Ad Standards, to be able to rely on a clause in the contract where you could request that the influencer takes the content down, that all helps in your favor as well if you've been professional about it, up front. Similarly, if you've got that clause in the contract that asks for pre-approval of content, that's another way you can help protect your reputation. So irrespective of whether it's a gift, whether it's contra, or whether you're paying fees to this influencer, please consider a contract. I really can't hone that in enough. Another question I get is about where do I find a contract? Can't I just copy stuff I find online, ask ChatGPT for a contract, or can I just copy a contract off a friend? And what I say to this, and this is a term that I love to use, is that the internet is full of legal landfill. You can't be guaranteed that whatever you're about to download or copy from a friend is going to be legally accurate. So I think it's always best to either see a lawyer or go to a credible template provider online where you're downloading a document that's been drafted by Australian lawyers. So finally, how do you find a good template and lawyers who you love? I've said here, templates are great and can be extremely useful if you're bootstrapping. So not everyone has the money to see a lawyer. Well, that's always your best option. You might want to find a legal template online. I said, look for a credible template provider, and please make sure it's based on Australian law. You don't want an American contract because they're really difficult to read, and quite often you'll find that the laws in Australia are different. If you do run into some difficulties in completing a template, or you actually need some advice in relation to a complaint or a breach of contract claim from an influencer, you're probably going to need a human. So what I've said here is try to find lawyers which offer fixed fees or full price transparency. There's no shame to shop around. Ask for the names of a few different lawyers and ask them upfront, how much is this going to cost? So you're not going to get any surprises. And then choose the one that has a reasonable or a competitive fee. Ask for discounts and share your budget. I've had clients often say to me, this is my budget. I only want to pay X amount. Can you do it? And if I have a long-standing relationship with the client, I try to offer value, so you can often negotiate with them for a price. So don't be afraid to negotiate. That's my point there. I am from Cherrypicka Legal Docs, and I do have a number of influencer style agreements on my site. I've got an influencer agreement for the brand, so that is for the brand itself, and it covers off on all of those things I've talked through today, all around those key points that you want to include in an influencer agreement. If you're an influencer yourself, I have a different agreement on there because the terms are slightly different and would be more favoured towards the influencer versus the brand. And I've also got a gifting insert template. So that is something that you can send to the influencer when you're just, gifting. And it just has those reminders on there about, disclosing the gifting relationship and any other key messages that you want to include. So that's a plug for me, but there are other template providers out there, or seek out legal advice in relation to your contracts. So that's me. Thank you very much. It's a 30-minute session today, and I hope that I've been able to teach you a little bit about collabs and what to look out for, so you'll avoid some of those ghosting situations that we hear about. So thank you very much. Take care.